What's going on, gardeners? It's a dreary afternoon here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, but this kind of weather is perfect for starting seeds. And on today's video, I'm going to show you how to grow the best lettuce of your life in 5 easy steps.
If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and check out my Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom apparel and gear.
Step number 1 is to select the right type of lettuce for the time of year. Many gardeners incorrectly believe that all lettuces love cool weather and tolerate freezing temperatures, but that isn't the case. There are warm season lettuces and cool season lettuces, and depending on the time of year, you have to grow the correct varieties. For example, most of your romaine lettuces are warm season lettuces. Varieties like this giant Caesar want daytime temperatures in the 70s and low 80s, and they don't really tolerate frost and freeze. Frost and freezing nights can actually damage this variety. So here where I live on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, zone 8B, I need to plant my romaine lettuces in late summer and start them indoors, and then transplant them out into my garden in early October when it starts cooling down, because I actually need to harvest them in late October, early November, before the frosts and freezes set in, because frosts and freezes can significantly damage your warm season lettuces. But a lot of your ruffled leaf and red leaf lettuces, like this red sales variety right here, are cool season lettuces and like totally different conditions. Daytime highs in the 70s and 80s can actually make this lettuce turn very bitter and bolt on you. Meanwhile, low temperatures in the 20 to 25 degree range will cause little to no damage at all. So a variety like this, I can't plant this out into my garden until late October or early November, and I usually have to direct sow it because I need all the warm weather to pass before this actually germinates on me, because heat will ruin this variety. So although these are both lettuces, they like totally different conditions. So make sure that you are growing the right varieties for the time of year. So now that you know the difference between warm season and cool season lettuce, let's move on to step number 2, which will be growing warm season lettuce. The overwhelming majority of people that are growing warm season lettuce, unless your climate is mild year-round, you will almost certainly want to grow your warm season lettuce from transplant. You will want to start them indoors in seed trays and then plant them out into the garden when the weather conditions are appropriate. That's because warm season lettuces tend to have a much longer days to maturity and they form larger heads. So most of us, we go from summer to winter very quickly, or we go from winter to summer very quickly. So we just don't have mild temperatures long enough to grow these directly from seed out in our gardens. So let's start off with growing romaine in springtime. Because romaine is not very tolerant of frost and freeze, we don't want to transplant them out into our garden until the danger of frost and freeze has passed. So we want to start our seeds indoors 6 weeks before our last chance of frost. We'll start them indoors either by a sunny windowsill or underneath grow lights 6 weeks before our last frost date, so we have nice big transplants ready to go out into the garden. And the reason why we want to do this is because spring turns into summer very quickly. So it's important that we harvest our romaines in May and June before it gets too terribly hot, because eventually once we start getting temperatures in the upper 80s and 90s, romaine will go bitter on us. So whenever we start seeing those 87, 88 degree temperatures set in, we want to make sure that we harvest our romaine in spring and summer before those days. When growing warm season lettuces in fall, we want to take the same type of approach. In the middle of summer, it's going to be way too hot to start our seeds outdoors, so we want to start them indoors in transplant trays where it is cooler. We want to take our fall inflection point where it starts getting really cool, let's say that's October 1st, and then we want to subtract 6 weeks from that, which is roughly going to be August 15th, and we are going to start our seeds indoors 6 weeks before it cools down. That way we can get the transplants going when it's still way too hot outside, and then carry them outdoors and transplant them into our fall gardens when it's finally nice and cool out. Now, sometimes nailing that timing can be tricky depending on the year. So if your transplants for your fall garden are ready before it cools down, you can transplant things underneath shade cloth. That can keep things artificially cool for a couple of weeks until it finally cools down. Similarly, if you mess up the timing for a spring planting and you're going to have a late frost, just cover your plants with a frost blanket or some agricultural fabric. That can buy you a couple of weeks and keep the frost damage off of them. Romaine types don't like frost, but if it's only going to be a very light freeze or a light frost and you cover them, generally speaking, they should be fine. Step number 3 is correctly growing cool season lettuces. Your cool season lettuces are totally different animals than your warm season lettuces. And I find that cool season lettuces almost never should be grown as transplants indoors. They should always be direct sown outside. That is because they are, generally speaking, much smaller lettuces. They require less solar energy and sun intensity, and they don't need nearly as many days to maturity. For example, this variety of lettuce right here has a days to maturity of only 20 to 45 days because it gives you the option of growing it as a small head that would be closer to the 45-day mark, or in rows of leaf lettuce that you can clip off with scissors like a cut and come again. Your first leaves will be ready for harvest only about 20 days after germination. Now, most of us have very erratic springs and falls. Our shoulder seasons don't last very long. Like I said, we go from winter to summer quickly and summer to winter quickly. But our cool seasons are usually very stable. So for that reason, we usually have pretty consistent temperatures throughout November and December, and also from February and March. January is usually too cool for a lot of us to grow outdoors unless you live in a warm climate or you're growing underneath hoop houses like I do. So for that reason, I always like direct sowing my cool season lettuces in trenches, in rows. I like to harvest them as cut and come again, where I peel off or I snip off the leaves as I need them, and then I can fertilize them with blood meal or fish emulsion, which has plenty of nitrogen, and the leaves will grow back very quickly and consistently throughout the winter where I live. In step number 4, I will show you how to grow lettuce in transplant trays, and this is how I'm going to start my warm season romaine lettuce for the fall. Now here I have a 72 cell transplant tray. I'm going to fill it with seed starting mix that I made myself and that I already pre-moistened. I'm going to fill all of the cells completely. Then at the end, I'm going to tamp them down so the amount of potting mix is a little bit lower than the total depth of the cell. And that is going to be the little buffer that we are going to sow our lettuce seeds at, so I have a little bit of room left up top for me to sprinkle on a little bit more mix to cover the seeds. One of my favorite little tricks is to use the seed tray inserts to place on top of one another and just use their own weight to lightly compact down the soil. The next thing I'm going to do is label all the rows in my seed tray. I'm actually going to be starting more than just lettuce seeds in this. I'm going to be starting a lot of my brassicas as well. So it's very important that if you're sowing different things together in the same tray, you label everything so you don't get them mixed up. Most lettuce seeds will be sown a 1/4 inch deep, but always check the back of your seed packet to verify the recommended planting depth. Regardless of lettuce variety, we are going to sow our seeds using a technique called overseeding, where we place 3 to 4 seeds per seed cell. Lettuce seeds have below average germination rates, but seed is also very inexpensive. If we only place 1 seed per cell, we will have many instances where nothing germinates in that cell. Overseeding is a cheap and easy way to ensure something germinates in every cell. After placing the seeds, we will cover them with a 1/4 inch of potting mix or whatever the recommended depth is on the back of your seed packet. Cells where multiple seeds germinate can later be thinned by removing the weakest plants prior to transplanting. Or, if you want to take a risk, you can try to separate the individual plants later. However, you do run the risk of damaging the roots of all the plants in that seed cell in the process. So be warned if you want to engage in separating the seedlings. Then, once all of the seeds have been sown and covered, we will lightly water in the mix. After you are done sowing your seeds, you can bring them inside underneath a grow light. Whether you use bottom heat with a seedling heat mat depends on the temperature of your room. I keep my office at about 77 degrees during this time of year, and the mid to upper 70s is the perfect temperature for warm season lettuce germination. If you like to keep your room a lot colder than that, you may have to use bottom heat to try and encourage the seedlings to germinate. Generally speaking, 75 to 79 degrees Fahrenheit Fahrenheit is ideal for warm season lettuce germination. And the fifth tip is to use shade cloth and frost fabric to account for undesirable temperatures. If there is one thing that I have learned as a gardener, it's that there is no such thing as an average year. Every year will break data averages. You will have a summer that will drag on too long, a winter that holds on tightly, and a spring that will arrive weeks late. Inexperienced gardeners compensate for these problems in temperature by delaying their plantings. They say, spring is late this year, so I will plant my spring garden late. Or summer just won't end this year, so I will delay my fall planting. This is a one-way ticket to disaster town. You cannot base your planting dates on temperatures because temperatures are erratic every single year. You have to maintain your planting dates regardless of temperatures because solar cycles never change. Solar intensity and day length maintains the same pattern every single year. So if you delay your spring plantings because it's still too cold, your plants will be trying to mature when the sun is too strong and they will bolt or they will become bitter on you. If you delay your fall plantings because it's still too hot outside, then the plants will run out of day length and solar intensity as they try to mature, and the days will be too short and the sun will become too weak and they will stall out and never reach maturity. Now obviously we are talking about lettuce and other cool crops here. For spring plantings of tomatoes, peppers, and other frost-sensitive plants, then you are unfortunately at the mercy of temperatures to some extent. But for your cold hardy plants, they are very flexible because they benefit from different covers to a dramatic extent. Now here where I live on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, Zone 8B, our summers are so wickedly hot and humid that I install shade cloth over top my entire garden from roughly Memorial Day to a little bit past Labor Day because the sun is too intense even for my summer vegetables like zucchini, cucumbers, and tomatoes, so they really benefit from this cover. But you don't need a fancy overhead shade cloth setup like I have in my garden. All you need to do is build yourself a cheap little PVC structure over your raised beds or over your earth beds if you garden in an earth bed garden. All this is PVC electrical conduit from the electrical aisle at Home Depot. It's really easy to build. Anybody can build this in 30 minutes. In fact, I will link to a video above and down in the video description that will show you exactly how to build a setup like this for dirt cheap. Now this bed right here was actually used to grow my spring lettuce. I planted my lettuce out in either late February and early March, and it matured and it grew all throughout May and into June, which is almost unheard of here in the coastal Carolinas because it is so hot and the sun is so intense by June. In fact, I still have the piece of shade cloth just sitting here that I haven't really done anything with because I'm probably going to plant my lettuce in this bed again. I grew some of the absolute most beautiful romaine that I have ever grown before in my entire life, and it was that giant Caesar variety in this exact bed. Big, beautiful heads, perfect, no bittering, delicious taste, and it lasted weeks longer than it normally would thanks to the protection of the shade cloth. And in this garden bed right here, I grew my winter lettuce last year using the same exact hoop structure, except instead of using shade cloth, I put a little bit of agricultural frost fabric over top to keep the hard frosts off. Now here where I live in Zone 8B, I can generally grow winter-style lettuces all winter long, but when we do get our annual minimums that are usually somewhere around 15 degrees or so every single year, a lot of times that can cause a little bit of bronzing or tip damage to the leaves when it comes out of nowhere like that. So by putting the agricultural fabric on top, it kept the hard freezes off of them, and they sailed through the winter with absolutely no damage at all. And I'm very confident that if you were to build yourself a little hoop structure like this, you could grow a cold hardy variety like that new red fire variety that I grew in this bed right here, all the way down to Zone 6, maybe even Zone 5 with a cover. So these hoop structures are versatile because they allow you to both maintain your planting dates or even plan out your cool season stuff when it's still a little bit too hot by keeping them under shade, or you can extend your growing season by keeping the frost off of them and increasing their cold hardiness and dragging out your growing season longer into the winter, possibly throughout the entire winter. And also keep in mind, you can use insect netting to protect your plants from insects in the dead of summer as well. I've been keeping my zucchini underneath insect netting to keep the vine borers and the squash bugs off of my zucchini, and it has worked perfectly. So there are many different covers that you can use when you have a little PVC hoop structure like this. And that right there is how you can grow the absolute best lettuce of your life. I am confident that if you follow the tips outlined in this video, you can up your lettuce game to such an extent that you may even, depending on your climate, be able to grow lettuce all year round. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring that notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the items that I featured in this video, like the seeds for the lettuce varieties, the shade cloth, the agricultural frost fabric, I will place direct links to all of them down in the video description. For everything else I use in real life in my garden, they are all linked in my Amazon storefront in the video description. So expand the video description, click on the Amazon storefront link, you'll see everything I use in real life. And while you're down there, please check out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support the channel. If you have any questions about the things that I discussed in this video, ask them down in the comments below. I will do my best to address them. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video.
Oh my goodness, it is raining so hard in Florida right now. Whose idea was it to go out to dinner tonight? Whose idea was it, Dale? Dale, come here and show everybody your beautiful face. Dale doesn't like the thunder so much. He's having some trouble. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, that's all right. Mommy's feeding him.